It's time for another edition of MLB This Week. It's the MLB This Week show with Rich and Gary talking more baseball for you. Hello and welcome to This Week in Baseball. It's MLB This Week show. My name is Rich.
And I'm Gary.
And hello, Gary, and welcome back to the broadcast here. We took last week off. It was Easter, of course, and Passover holiday, and it's great to be back with our listeners.
It certainly is, Rich, and I hope everybody had a nice Easter and Passover. And now it's back to business. We got the first week of baseball in the books, Rich.
Yes, we certainly do, and a lot of surprises around the league. We're talking about it a little bit before the show. A lot of the teams that they say we're going to do really well or haven't quite shown up yet. But then, of course, some of the other teams have been playing well. But let's look at the American League so far. Boston doing well over there in the AL East, Gary. What can you say? They're having a great start to the season.
Yeah, they certainly are. Got good offense, and they I don't know if the Yankee fans aren't going to like it, but they kind of ran into the Yankees and have just really run over them. Yankees have not gotten off to a good start, and of course, beating the Red Sox has been very difficult for them. So, not a good start for the Yankees, but as you say, the Red Sox are off to a good start.
Yes, they are, and Toronto Blue Jays right up there with the Yankees in the AL East. Over in the Central, the Tigers have gotten off to a 6-0 start, but the Kansas City Royals have also gotten off to a 6-0 start, and that's one of those teams that's a big surprise for a lot of people.
Yeah, Rich, they're proving that they're for real, that what they did last year in the playoffs was not a fluke, and that they're there. And look, 6-0 start, the 3 at home, 3 on the road. That's the way to go, I guess.
That's a pretty great start. Out in the West, the Texas Rangers all tied up with the Oakland A's. Nobody could have figured out to start off the season, but it is only the first week, as you said, Gary, so I'm sure a lot of surprises and things like that will be fading away as we get into the first couple weeks of the game. But over in the National League, it's a surprise with the Atlanta Braves, and your Mets handed them their first defeat of the season today.
Goodness, they should have won last night as well, but got the rubber game today, and so they'll come home tomorrow for their home opener. But your Phillies started out decently too, 3-3 at this point. That's not bad considering that they played those Nationals, and I think we discussed this on Mets Musings. This is the time to get the Nationals because they're not doing so well. They got some injured players, and they're struggling at bat and on the field and in the field, I should say, fielding-wise, defensively. And how about the Marlins? They were a sexy pick for the wild card, and they're off to an awful start, Rich.
Yeah, they are. And as you said, I think you had the Nationals all figured out. I appeared on your show, Mets Musings Podcast, which you can find at MetsMusings.com or over at BaseballTalkRadio.com. It was great to be on your show. But, yes, you gave me the advanced scouting on that and said that now is the time to play the Nationals. They're hurting with injuries, and the Phillies kind of took advantage of that a little bit. They almost swept them today. They lost 3-2 in the last game of the series, but they face them next weekend again in Washington. So we'll be seeing a lot of the Nationals. And as you said, the Marlins not starting out well. They're 1-5 so far, but we're also going to be giving you our picks that we did. We didn't do it last week, of course, because we were off with the holiday. So let's just run through the league leaders for the rest of the National League, and then we'll go right in with our picks. The Cincinnati Reds are holding first place out there, closely behind the St. Louis Cardinals, 3-2.
Yeah, and again, Cincinnati, nobody thought that they would be this good. And, of course, they got off to a 4-0 start, dropped their last two. But Cardinals starting to creep up, and Pittsburgh won today. So Milwaukee's a bit of a surprise because some people actually I've seen pick them to at least win a wild card. And remember the start they had last year. And they're down at 1-5. So, but, again, it's just the first week.
Yep. First week jitters for a lot of the players, and of course some even the better players got off to a bad start. Out in the West, it's a total surprise out there. That's probably where the biggest surprise is of the week, the first week in baseball. The Colorado Rockies in first place. How could that be?
And that's almost like you flip-flop the division, you know. L.A. is in last at this point, and but again, everybody's around 500. Colorado's off to a 4-1 start, but it's early and it's all pretty mishmash. And Dodgers are in last, though. That's intriguing with the team that they have, and the start by Adrian Gonzalez, who hit home runs in his first 3 games. And went 10 for 13, had 5 homers and 2 doubles, and was just off to a tremendous start. But the rest of the team, and Kershaw even got hammered the other day. So, wow, it's a wacky year so far.
Yeah, a lot of upside down standings for right now. Of course, usually in the first week it could look like this, so a lot of people not too worried about what the future holds for their teams. So we're going to go right into our picks here for you. I know the season's already started. We're into the first week. But before we do that, Gary, I wanted to let our listeners know that we're now sponsored by you, the listener. You can go over to our Patreon page, and that's over at patreon.com/MLBThisWeek. It's all one word. There you can sponsor our show, make a small donation, $1 a month, $2 a month, whatever you feel comfortable with, all the way up to $10 per month. And if you do that and you have a business or service you want to advertise, we're going to mention it for you. So a low price way to get your business, website, or your service mentioned on the show, and it'll give us a little bit of extra funds to do something with the show. And Gary, yesterday I was browsing some of the Patreon people that have websites up there, and you know, there's a podcast out of LA, and what they did this year with Patreon was ask their listeners to fund a trip to Dodger spring training for them so they could go and report what they saw to the listeners, and they actually achieved their goal, which was like $850. So I'm very jealous.
Well, I guess they're going from L.A. to Arizona. It's not as far as we'd have to travel to go to spring training from our area in the Northeast here to Florida, but it does give one thoughts, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And when you sign up at Patreon, you can put your picture up, your own account picture. You register for an account. It takes 2 seconds, and you'll be right on our donations page. Everybody will see that you donated to our show. And like I said, if you want to go for $10 a month, we would appreciate that. You have a business out there. What a cheap way to get a free mention on a show that gets a couple hundred downloads or more per show at this point. We keep growing. So let's make a goal of at least getting us onto a new podcast host for $15 a month. I'm going to put that up on our Patreon page. Again, it's patreon.com/MLBThisWeek, all one word. You can find that link on our blog at MLBThisWeek.com as well. And, please sponsor us. I would appreciate the sponsorship from our listeners.
Certainly would, Rich.
Well, why don't you kick off our picks for who we think will be the best teams in the major leagues, Gary?
All right, I'm going to start with the AL East, Rich, and I'm going to go with the Baltimore Orioles. I know they lost a couple of players over the winter, but the Buck Showalter, you can't put anything past him, and I don't see a lot of well, I shouldn't say I don't see a lot of competition. I meant I don't think the Yankees are going to be much of a competition unless they do something in a hurry. Boston could be a threat, but I don't know if their pitching is going to hang in there till the whole season. So I'm going to go with Baltimore, Rich.
That's a quality pick there in the AL East.
And you want me to keep going? I'll go to the Central.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I know the sexy pick is the White Sox, but I'm going to go with the Tigers. I'm going to go. They have still got a decent pitching staff, and Verlander hopefully will come back and healthy. And look, they're off to a great start. So I'm going to go with the Detroit Tigers. In the West, I'm going to go with the Angels. I know they're off to a bad start, but what do I know about the West? So I'm going to go with the Angels, and for the wild cards, I'm going to go with the Seattle Mariners and the Kansas City Royals. I still like that Royals team. I like what they do, so I'm going to go with the Royals.
Very great picks there for the American League, and I'll run through mine here. In the AL East, I have the Toronto Blue Jays finally finishing first in the division. They have some competition in the Baltimore Orioles, as you said. And strangely enough, Gary, I have the Yankees finishing out of the money over there in the AL East. I don't think they're going to make even a contention for a wild card. In the Central, I'm going with the favorites. That would probably have to be the Tigers. They've gotten off to a great start. I've picked them before the season started. Mm-hmm. But I don't see there's any reason to pick anyone else there. And out west, I will agree with you. I'll go with the Los Angeles Angels. I think it's going to be the Angels' year in more ways than one. I kind of had them going further last year, but you'll see in the next coming minutes for my picks on the World Series. But for my wild cards, I'm going with Seattle and Boston. So it's a couple of strong picks there, I think, but I do like your picks as well.
Yeah, I think you picked good there, Rich. And how did you pick the National League?
Well, in our home league, so to speak, the NL East, where our favorite teams reside, I have the Nationals winning it. As you said on your show at Mets Musings, this is the time to play the Nationals because I think in a month or two, nobody's going to want to play that team. I have them winning the East very easily. Over in the Central, I have the St. Louis Cardinals. They've found a winning combination somehow out there. They get the job done. They even shuffle players in and out and still find a winning team. Out west, I'm going with the Dodgers. They had a bad start to the year, but I think they sort of patched the holes up and get on track out there in the West.
Okay, and your wild cards in the National League?
The wild cards, I think you'll be happy with this pick, Gary. I'm going to have your New York Mets back in the playoffs for 2015. And the Pittsburgh Pirates. I think the Mets and the Pirates have been on that edge, deserving to be back in a playoff role. So I have those two teams as my wild cards.
Well, Rich, we agree on almost everything. We just have the same teams. We just flip-flop two teams. In the East, I've got the Nationals winning. In the Central, and this is where we differ, I have the Pirates winning the Central. And in the West, I've got the Dodgers, and my wild cards are the New York Mets and the St. Louis Cardinals. So we're close. We just flip-flopped there a couple of teams. So.
Sure. Well, yeah, that would be amazing if the Pirates won the Central. They've got some good players. I don't know if their starting pitching is good enough to get them there, especially I think I just heard Andrew McCutchen came down with a sore foot or something to that nature, a sore arm. Just heard that today. I think he's day-to-day right now, so we'll have to keep our eye on that. But, yeah the Pirates are going to do well.
If McCutchen goes down for any period of time, that could really hurt their chances.
So, Gary, let's go back to the American League. Who do you have in the American League Championship Series?
Well, I've got the Angels and Tigers squaring off, and I've got the Angels coming out on top.
Very nice. So we agree. I'll go with my ALCS. I have the Angels against the Toronto Blue Jays, and I have the Angels coming out on top as well.
And in the National League?
National League, I have the two powerhouses that were picked by most people before the season started, one on each coast. I have the Washington Nationals and the LA Dodgers in a powerhouse matchup for the NLCS.
And I have the same, Nationals and Dodgers, with the Nationals coming out on top.
And believe it or not, I picked the Dodgers, narrowly beating the Nats. So I've got a California World Series lined up, LA Dodgers and the LA Angels, a LA series.
Nationals and Angels series. And are we giving a winner, or
why not?
Okay, I'm going to go with the Washington Nationals.
You're going to go with the Nationals for their first ever World Series. I'm going to go with the Angels. I think they're overdue. Mike Trout, he still has this to get onto his resume to go with his all of his other awards so far. And I kind of think they pull it together this year. They might be missing a piece of the puzzle right now, but I think they add that puzzle piece and they win the World Series.
Just, the pitching is what kind of gets me. And in a short series, it's all about the pitching. And the Nationals, they got Scherzer and Zimmerman and they've got the arms there, so that's really why I'm going to pick the Nationals.
Yeah, that's a solid pick. You can't go against that. They've been bubbling on edge now for a couple of years. Some surprise teams of mine that I wrote down in the NL, the Marlins, of course. A lot of people have picked them to do well this year. And over in the AL, I've picked the Baltimore Orioles. So they would be my surprise teams or teams to watch.
Yeah, I guess my surprise teams would probably be in the National League would be the Cubbies. Don't know how good they're going to be, but they've got a really good young team, and they might be a year or two away. The rumor is now that they may be shopping Castro. We'll have to see, but that's my surprise in the NL. In the AL, I have to admit I don't follow them that closely, but perhaps the Blue Jays may be my surprise team in that league.
Very cool. So there you have it. You have our picks for the teams that we expect to do well this year in baseball. And Gary, we'll get over to our stories of the week here. And you talked a little bit about this one when you were mentioning your picks, and that's Mr. Gonzalez is red hot out there.
Yeah, he got off to a really good start, but it is a team sport, and as I said, through the team's first 3 games, he was 10 for 13, 5 homers. He got off to a big power start, and he had an astonishing 2.846 OPS. So that's the way to start a season if you're going to do it.
Yeah, it really is.
It's hard to keep that pace going.
Yeah, that's amazing to start off with that kind of a season in the first week. He could end up with 80 home runs at the end of the season if he stays that hot.
And then they will be checking him for steroids, perhaps.
Yeah, extra checks for him. Well, the first story I've encountered this week was one that I read in a newspaper, and that is the MLB. They're back on a social media alert. A couple new apps have snuck into the market, which are very popular with people. One of them is called Periscope, and it's sort of like a podcasting app, believe it or not, Gary. A lot of people have used it to do instant podcasts, especially celebrities. It's very easy for them to get the word out. They can post things right to Facebook, and if you're a celebrity already, you're going to have thousands of people, some even more than that, hundreds of thousands of people that follow them on Facebook. They can communicate to that group of people right through this app called Periscope. Well, the Major League Baseball, they have not been big fans of this app, and there's another one called Meerkat as well. They actually fear these apps. They have a fear that fans might start sending games out via social media on their smartphones or tablets. And there was a big headline in all the business publications saying that the MLB will bench baseball fans caught streaming games. There was an article saying that an official at the MLB will be watching to see how it's used and when. So they're going to be monitoring these live streaming apps, and baseball just doesn't get social media at all, Gary.
And the thing is that I hate to tell them, but people are streaming games already. You just got to find the links. I mean, the links are out there. You got to do some digging around, but they're out there, and they just, they got to embrace it or something, or beat these apps to the punch and stream your games online. They got this MLB.com package, and it's great, but you can't get your home team. It's blacked out. So why would I get MLB.com? I mean, it makes no sense at all to me. My hope, I get it. If you live in Arizona and you're a Met fan, then you can get the Met games. But
right.
if I'm, I'll give you an example. My wife had surgery on opening day, and we were in the hospital. And now, luckily, it was on ESPN, and ESPN put it on their website, so I was able to see the game. I was able to pick up the game. But otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to get it, because if I had bought the MLB.com package, it would have blacked it out in New York. You're not allowed to get your home team. And I understand it goes with the whole thing that there's a certain mileage area that the local stations or the local cable station has a right over and everything. But to me, if you're picking up their broadcast, what they got to do is figure out how to count it in the ratings for SNY or whatever the station is, and give them, because that's all they're concerned about. They're concerned about their commercials. So if you stream that broadcast, I mean, it's like just watching it at home, and I don't know, and it's just like I said, there's people streaming this. You can go on Ustream and follow links, and sometimes you can find that it gets crazy a little bit trying to follow these guys, but there are people doing it.
Yeah, and there's let's see, this other app called Meerkat. Uh, the MLB president of business and media, his name's Bob Bowman, says fans don't have the right to emulate the game. Live streaming doesn't change that. We'll be watching to see how it's used and when. And there's also a San Francisco Giants employee named Bill Shallow. He told the Wall Street Journal that he'd be monitoring the stadium's network in order to spot potential mobile streamers. So if you're sitting in the stands as a fan, Big Brother will be watching you if you go to use one of these apps. I doubt there's too many people that will stream a live game as it's happening for any length of time.
And yeah, what are you going to do? You're going to hold the phone up there the whole game in a certain position. It's going to be jumpy. Your seats may not be the best. It's, I just ignore it because it makes them. Because now, the first thing I did was I just went and I downloaded Periscope to see what this thing's all about. They're going to encourage people to do it instead of just, ignoring it.
Exactly. And it's something that baseball sort of jumps on a bandwagon. If people remember last year or so, a lot of baseball podcasts were erased out of the iTunes logs. Baseball apparently sent them a letter talking about their trademarks and things. That's when things go bad, when people don't talk about your product. If you have a pizza shop in town, in a local town, and people aren't saying, oh, wow, how great Luigi's Pizza is all the time, talking about it, bragging it up, well, guess what? The word doesn't get around. I think baseball works the same way. A lot of people are influenced by shows like this, bloggers that have their own blogs. They're not making a lot of money, and they're certainly not trying to steal any trademarks. If baseball knew how much bloggers and podcasters made, they'd actually feel sorry for them, Gary. They'd want to give them a free ticket or maybe a coupon for a hot dog when they go to the game, because most bloggers and podcasters don't make a nickel.
And a lot of us are positive and trying to put out a positive message about their product. There are negative ones out there. I see that, but they've got to learn to embrace this stuff more and just don't be so controlling over everything.
That's true. So we'll have to see how this monitoring of these new apps comes about by this organization here. And it's funny because you don't hear football worried about this. You don't see the headlines. The NFL is taking steps to do that. It's always baseball.
Well, I think because it's a longer season and things can slip by more, and it's cold. They play in cold weather, so they're not afraid of certain things. I guess that people are gonna hold phones up. So I don't know. I'm sure. Maybe they just bury it for football too. Who knows? The stories. It might be something against baseball that they have to get these stories out there. But just they'd be better off ignoring it.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to have too many people streaming right from their seats. Number one, your battery would drain after about 20 minutes of high definition video. So I don't think you're going to have too much of a problem with that. So moving on. Yeah, the HD video will drain your phone faster than you can say boo most of the time.
That's for sure.
So, Gary, you have our next show here out in San Francisco. They have some reason to be happy.
Well, they extended the Giants did. Their front office executive Brian Sabean and manager Bruce Bochy got contract extensions through the 2019 season. The financial terms were not released. They also announced that Sabean has been promoted from general manager to executive vice president of baseball operations, and assistant general manager Bobby Evans has been promoted to senior vice president and general manager, while Jeremy Shelley has been elevated to vice president and assistant general manager of pro scouting and player evaluation. And Giants have won 3 World Series under the guidance of Sabean and Bochy, including last year. And interestingly enough, we're not picking them this year because they seem to win in an even year, and this being an odd year. No love for the Giants, but love for their bosses out there. Sabean and Bochy both get promotions. Well, not so much Bochy, but he gets extended as the manager, and that's what you like to see.
Yeah, not bad for those two. Of course, San Francisco every other year is usually when they win the World Series, and this is one of those odd years, so nobody has picked them. So we'll have to see what happens with that. Our next story here is Rob Manfred comes out talking about what's the worst thing that can happen to a baseball player who violates a rule, and what rule would be the worst rule to be violated. And of course that would be betting on baseball. This was just asked the other day on Meet the Press to Rob Manfred, and that's what his response was. In his opinion, he says if you bet on baseball, you'll be banished for life. He was appearing also on the show CNBC's Squawk Box, and those statements were meant to kind of allude to Pete Rose not being in the best of shape to be readmitted back into baseball when you hear words like this come out of the commissioner's mouth. He also went on to say that underneath the betting on baseball would be the steroid issue. He doesn't think that steroids and the abuse of substances are on the same level as gambling. He says the rules against steroids should be less, and there's a difference in that the punishment for steroids have been collectively bargained with the Players Association. So with that, Gary, I think that they're watering stuff down. They're saying that one thing's the worst thing you could ever do, while they're making allowances for these players that cheat with steroids. I don't see a big difference in it.
So why give them suspensions then for the steroids if it's not that big a deal? I mean, the Mets just got news that their closer Henry Mejia was violated the policy, the drug policy. He came up positive for a steroid, and Minnesota, I think he's the Twins now. Irvin Santana was last week, and there was another player that got caught, 4 in all, and I can't think of the fourth one's name, but got caught with steroids so far coming out of spring training. So if it's not that big a deal, why are we concerned about it? If it's not that big a deal, then why are they suspending people, and why don't we tell the writers that they have to elect Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens to the Hall of Fame if it's not that big a deal? I think, to me personally, baseball is such a numbers game that the steroids would be worse than gambling. I mean, I just finished a book on Ty Cobb, and gambling was like prolific. I mean, everybody used to bet on games in those days, it's just it's just very strange, these comments that he made about the gambling, and I don't know if it's an anti Pete Rose thing that they're trying to make it so bad. Uh, the steroids affects the heart and soul of the game. I don't know if gambling does.
Yeah, it's sort of gambling is sort of like a victimless crime, whereas the steroid abuse is, there are victims. The baseball player himself is a victim of it, and he's artificially enhancing himself to play a game. So, as you said, and there's another reason why I think they put it on a different pedestal is that last line that he said. Steroid issues are collectively bargained. The gambling nobody can contest at this point. So that's the way they weaken laws and rules as players decide to take these steroids, and it hasn't really stopped them, the rules, as we've seen in this past week when you said 4 players have been given suspensions. But even further on, he was asked about the fantasy sports now, where there's a couple of big leagues going around. The DraftKings, I believe, are one. See a lot of ads for them. There's another big one as well. I can't remember the name right now. But it actually involves money and fantasy sports. So it's sort of a gambling in a different way. They've skirted around the laws of gambling somehow in the name of playing fantasy sports for money. So I don't see what the difference between that and gambling is. In fact, I think fantasy sports is probably worse than regular gambling.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think DraftKings is like the official fantasy league of the MLB. So in a way, they're condoning it. Well, people will argue and say because they're not numbers in lotto, and if you go to a casino and you play cards, don't you have to pick your cards? So and what about if you're in a big time fantasy league and you see a player or something, that's what they're worried about, guys throwing games and stuff. Who knows? The 21st century could be the people throwing it for fantasy leagues too.
Yeah, and there was a question offered up to Rob Manfred about sports betting, and believe it or not, the MLB response was this. He said, gambling in terms of our society has changed its presence on legalization, and I think it's important for there to be a conversation between me and the owners about what our institutional position will be. So he's not going out on a limb and discrediting the possibility of somewhere down the road Major League Baseball making money off of gambling should several states get gambling, so on and so forth. So MLB taking curious stances. If a player is involved in gambling, he's banished forever, but yet they may endorse gambling themselves. So it's a very weird line that they walk.
And it's not like Pete Rose is like the last guy that was caught in gambling. So it's the steroids. There's been tons of guys since they started this, and there's probably tons more that they didn't catch. So very strange comments by the commissioner.
Yep, and we'll have to keep our eyes on the future comments in regards to this, as well as the Pete Rose story. I want to let our listeners know you can find us on MLBThisWeek.com, the blog. You can see all of our shows. You can listen to us on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. Each week you can take us along for the drive and listen to the show. And we appreciate each and every one of you that take the time to download and listen to the show.
Yes, we certainly do.
Gary, your story up here, the Padres renewing for a long time.
Well, Rich, this is one of those stories that you don't hear a lot about, and this is a nice story. And the Padres are doing things the right way. In an article for the OC Register, Steve Bishop shares the sad story of Matt LaChapa, a former Padres prospect from the Barona Indian Reservation just east of San Diego. LaChapa suffered a heart attack while warming up in the bullpen for a start at Class A Rancho Cucamonga in 1996 and is now confined to a wheelchair, but the Padres have renewed his basic minor league contract every season, in part so he can have access to health insurance. Now, this article is originally from 2005, but USA Today Sports confirmed on Tuesday of this past week that the pitcher again signed his annual deal with the Padres for 2015. And to me, that's a class act, Rich.
Yeah, that's a real class act. You don't hear too much of that, especially in today's world where every dollar is counted, and yeah, it's a cool story.
And it's too bad that the Giants, who have done a lot for oh my gosh, the name escapes me. That poor man that got jumped and beaten in L.A. a couple of years ago on opening day. It's too bad that they can't sign him to like a minor league contract, but I don't think that would hold water with their insurance companies at this point because he's got astronomical medical bills. And I apologize that his name is escapes me at this point.
Is it Brian Stowe?
I believe it is, or close to that.
On a story here that says he was a Giants fan. He suffered a traumatic brain injury after a beating by two men dressed in Dodgers gear following a March 31st, 2012 home opener between the two teams.
Yes, that would be him.
So yeah, it's you know, I never am a proponent of wearing my team's home colors in another park. I just always had the fear that that wouldn't work out well for me for some reason.
And yet, a lot of people do it, and I don't know. I mean, you could be jumped by your own fans too, so who knows?
That's for sure. Well, this next story we're going to go out to Japan for, and I wish I could have this on video for you because you actually have to see it to believe it. Just a couple of days ago in Japan, there was a game that opened up, and the opening pitch was thrown out by a pitcher who was on the mound, dressed in a business suit. Behind him, there was about 5 or 6 more people also dressed in the same business suit. As he went to wind up, those 5 or 6 people extended their hands like a Medusa type of situation and started flailing their hands around as the guy went to wind up. So it almost looked like the pitcher had about 12 hands coming at the batter when he went to throw the ball. So I'm going to post this up on our website at MLBThisWeek.com because you actually have to see it. I probably, my description of it didn't do it justice, Gary.
Well, let's see. I might have a picture of it that I can show. Just give me a second.
Sure. And that's what the fun thing about is, baseball around the world doesn't always take the shape and form that we know it as here in the States. So you got to check out some of these stories over the year, and they're pretty funny. They're pretty entertaining.
Let's see. It's a GIF. I don't know if it's going to play, but there you go.
Yep, that's it.
Strange.
It's very wild looking there. What a way to start a game off.
I'll say, and they're known for that kind of stuff over there too, because they have the, remember that one, the girl with the doing the handstands and the cartwheels and stuff. And
Yeah.
over in Asia, they do a lot of crazy stuff. But a great baseball country.
Yes, they are. They love the game, and they do things their own way, which is, a good thing for them.
Yeah, and Rich, I'm gonna skip to the next story and go right to this one because this was an interesting one. And the Astrodome. I don't know if anybody remembers this. The eighth wonder, or the ninth wonder of the world, turned 50 years old. It stands now pretty much abandoned. They may be tearing it down. That would be a shame, I think. It's the eighth wonder of the world, excuse me. But it did turn, it's still up, and it turned 50 years old on Thursday. The team celebrated the occasion at Minute Maid Park with first pitch honors going to Denny Hofheinz, the daughter of Astrodome visionary Judge Roy Hofheinz and former pitcher Larry Durka. The Astrodome opened on April 9, 1965, when a sellout crowd watched the Astros beat the Yankees 2-1 in an exhibition game, and the Astros were known as the Colt 45s in their first 3 seasons, and they played at Colt Stadium, which was in the Astrodome parking lot. Of course, that came down, and Judge Hofheinz and R.E. Bob Smith spearheaded the effort to bring Major League Baseball to Houston, and they were the franchise's first ownership tandem. And on April 17th and 18th, the Astros will have a more extensive celebration of the 50th anniversary of the 65 season. There will be 2 giveaways, a Jimmy Wynn bobblehead and a replica Astrodome. And additionally, both the Astros and the visiting Angels will wear their respective 1965 uniforms for the April 18th game. And that should be pretty neat. The Astrodome featured baseball played under a roof in air-conditioned comfort and cushioned seats instead of the standard hard slabs of wood found in most stadiums at the time. Another of the Astrodome signature features was its big scoreboard, which displayed cowboys shooting bullets that ricocheted across the screen, and a giant steer's head at each end with a Texas and U.S. flag on its horn. So 50 years, Rich, of the Astrodome, and really was a pretty intriguing place in its time. First time that they played indoor baseball, and the first couple of games they had a lot of problem with fly balls because the glass was clear, I believe, and they had to end up painting it, and when they painted it, it killed the natural grass that they had, so they had to invent AstroTurf for that field. But one interesting bit of trivia, that the first home run hit there was hit by Mickey Mantle of the New York Yankees in that exhibition game. So 50 years to the Astrodome, and as I said, it's really a shame that it's gone into neglect, and I believe they're going to demolish it at some point. I wish they could save it, and should have renovated and done something with it, but at least we get to see it for its 50th anniversary.
Yeah, that's one of those stadiums that, for years have been a mainstay, and over the years it gets harder and harder to maintain those stadiums and more expensive. They'd probably have to put so many millions into it, it just wouldn't pay them to keep doing that. But yeah, it's been used for many events, concerts, things like that, and of course the Houston Astros. That was in vogue. That was like a space project back in the 60s, Gary. You just didn't see buildings like that going up, and it stayed that way for many years.
And of course, they used to have the grounds crew would come out in where the Astrodome astronauts helmets and stuff, and clean clean around the bases and stuff, and Lindsey Nelson, the Mets announcer, once they had a gondolier way up on the top, and he once broadcast a game from up there. And the story is it was very terrifying looking down. There wasn't that much to hold on to, with a small rail or something. But a lot of, like you said, a lot of events, the Billie Jean King and um, that name is
Bobby Riggs.
yeah. Thank you. NCAA finals were there, and of course it was the first indoor stadium of them all. So 50 years ago.
Yep. So we wish the Astrodome well. Of course, we doubt it'll ever be used again for baseball. It's just like some of the old stadiums, like Shea Stadium. Gary, I'm sure a lot of Met fans kind of miss the old stadium. Phillies fans as well. They miss Veteran Stadium, and across the country, some other stadiums went down, and it's just unfortunate. Once they lose their usefulness, they're just basically scrapped.
And Chicago's trying to maintain. They go the opposite direction. They're renovating Wrigley Field, and I don't know if you thought it was as strange as I did, but watching that game last Sunday night from Wrigley Field, how strange it was not to see anybody in the bleachers because, well, there are no bleachers right now. They ripped out the bleachers to do renovations. They replaced all the steel and underneath and have put up a big jumbotron board, which I got to tell you, it looks totally out of place in that ballpark. It just was annoying to me, and I'm not for the people that sit in the across the street on the rooftops or anything like that. I just thought it looked totally out of place in that ballpark where they have it, but that's for them to decide. But with the bad weather and everything, they had a lot of delays in the construction, and they will have bleachers, they hope, by the end of the year. I think the right field is going to open in May and the left in June, or vice versa. But it's tough living in this part of the country when you're living up in the north and you get those cold winters and stuff to get. And this is a major, extensive renovation. So we'll see what happens with that. But the Astrodome, they didn't want to bother renovating. They just built a new ballpark.
Speaking of that, Gary, before I get on with the last story of the night here, how did you like the new ESPN K-Zone that they have up for all their games now?
It's interesting. A little confused if I would want it. I don't. I'm not crazy about it being up there all the time. I like the way they used to do it, where they'd show it after the pitch or whatever. But everybody's trying to use technology and find some little new gimmick, and that's what they're doing. And it is interesting to see where the pitches are, and
Yeah.
But I just thought it was a bit much.
I wonder if that's sort of some secret plan to one day down the road use electronics to call balls and strikes. I mean, you haven't heard anything like that yet, but I kind of think it's like a test project that baseball is allowing them to use it for every pitch. They want to see what happens with some of these balls and strikes, and as you found out on the first couple of games of the year, if you watched some of the games on ESPN, some of those balls were outside, some of them were inside, or outside the strike zone, but called strikes. But the one particular ump I was thinking of, he was calling the game consistently anyway. If it was an inch or two or three outside of the box, did not light up, but he was calling a strike. So if anything, it showed that, yes, there are umpires that have an expanded strike zone. And I'm not so sure that MLB and Major League Baseball isn't watching this with like a hawk as well.
Well, they have the overhead cameras. They had that Quest thing or whatever it was a couple of years ago. I don't know. It 9 times out of 10, it seems like they're pretty accurate. And where is this? They can tell you where is this picking up the ball? Is it at the front of the plate? Is it at a going by the catcher's gloves? I don't know. It's an interesting thing, but I think it's just a toy. I don't think it'll work. You need that human reaction. You need that the batter needs to hear ball or strike right away. How are they going to do it if it's got to be processed electronically? There's always going to be that slight second delay, and I think that's going to throw off things. If just think of a guy stealing or something, and it's a 3-2 count, and he's running, and they throw him out at second, and then comes up it was ball 4. It's just going to delay the game and throw everything off. So I don't think, they've gone to the replay, and the replay's been good. The umpires have accepted it, and it even shows that how many times the umpires are right.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see more about that as the season goes on. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that there was some sort of project going on in use maybe for the playoffs. They're going to use that electronic strike zone. We'll have to see. But our last story of the night here, Gary, is one example of how baseball might be going to the birds again. And I know we had a story about this a couple of weeks ago on one of our shows. But here's another one for you. Usually on opening day and special days in baseball, some local dignitaries or celebrities get tabbed to throw out the opening pitch for that particular game. Well, today in Cincinnati, they play the St. Louis Cardinals, and bringing out the first pitch was none other than an African penguin. He actually brought the ball out to the mound. He was from the Newport Aquarium, and the Newport Aquarium and the Reds teamed up to have Paula the Penguin deliver the game ball right out to the mound, and it was quite a treat for the fans today in Cincinnati.
Okay.
Sort of a cross-promotion there. Baseball, again, there's truth to it's going to the birds.
Well, I you know what? I think that we got to end on that one.
Yes, we do. And that brings our show to a timely end here, MLB This Week. Don't forget, visit our Patreon page. You can go right on with your PayPal account, any Visa or MasterCard. $1 or $2 a month is all we ask. Check us out on our website, MLBThisWeek.com. Also, our Twitter handle, MLBThisWeek. Gary, it's another great show, and looking forward to the next one.
And can't wait, Rich. See you next week.